Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I want to thank the Minister for introducing these regulations, which cover, as he set out, three of the UK's regulators, Ofwat, Ofgem and Ofcom. And as the Minister has set out, the regulations we are considering today is in relation to the growth duty as set out in Section 108 of the Deregulation Act 2015, which requires these particular regulators to consider how best to promote economic growth as they exercise their core functions. We recently saw the growth duty expanded to the financial services regulator, regulates the FCA and the PRA as part of the Financial Services and Markets Bill. And there are now over 50 regulators bound by the growth duty. And the legislation will see the growth duty expanded to Ofgem, Ofwat and Ofcom, and will therefore mean these regulators will now have to consider how their functions can promote economic growth. I would be grateful if the Minister could set out some of the lessons learned from the experience of those regulators that have already got the growth duty built into their objectives. Labour recognises the importance of the water, energy and the communication sectors to our economy and the vital role that the three regulators under discussion today play in shaping these sectors. So we agree in principle with the need for these regulators to formally recognise their role in contributing to economic growth where viable. However, as I'm sure, and the Minister's alluded to some of this, I'm sure many colleagues may agree, such a move has the potential to create frictions or opposing competing demands on regulators as they look to carry out their core regulatory functions. So we must make sure that we strive for sustainable economic growth that is forward-looking, inclusive, and based on strong and secure foundations. And we have seen in other debates, and the Minister will be aware, when the competitiveness duty was introduced in terms of the role of regulation in financial services. There's been extensive discussions that he and I were part of in the Treasury Committee about making sure that primary objectives of stability did not conflict with competitiveness, and much work has been done and lessons have been learnt in how to make sure those things happen appropriately and does not cause confusion within the regulatory system as well as out there in the market. I'm sure it hasn't escaped many members' attention that of the three regulators under consideration, Ofwat is already under significant scrutiny and pressure, as we saw in 2023, when we saw the highest year on record of sewage discharges. So there will be, rightly, public concern about making sure that additional duties, while welcome, do not add an additional set of pressures that are hard to deliver on. So I hope the Minister can shed more light on telling us today how a regulator like Ofwat can fulfil existing duties as well as the new one. After 14 years of the government being in power, the sewage scandal has polluted waters and open spaces across our country with filthy raw sewage. Not one English river is classified as being in a healthy condition. None meet good chemical standards and few meet good ecological standards. The Environment Agency data shows sewage has been dumped every 2.5 minutes on average since 2016. And not only has the government allowed the water companies to dump sewage and neglect our vital water infrastructure, some of these companies responsible have been rewarded by allowing shareholders to receive dividends and the water bosses pocketing bonuses. So I know this is not the Minister's direct responsibility, but I hope he'll take note of the concerns, the public concerns, about the need for strict regulation to make sure the standards are met and people don't have to suffer the consequences of neglect. And given the pressures on Ofwat, can the Minister tell us how confident he is that they've got the appropriate resources, not only to fulfil their current duties, but also provide the appropriate to respond to the growth duty? Do they have the expertise within the institution, along with the other regulators, to focus on the growth duty? Because if we want the growth duty to be effective and successful, it's important that the people within those institutions are able to work with the industry and with government to make sure that the growth duty is meaningful. The economic impact assessment estimated the familiarisation costs of the growth duty to have some resource implications. Will the Minister make clear exactly what those resource implications are and whether they can be met with existing budgets or whether any additional resources are needed and will be provided? I'd also like to seek assurances from the Minister that the regulator's core consumer and environmental responsibilities will not be jeopardised by this move. I'm assured by some of the things he's already said, but if he could say more about precisely how his department will, and other relevant departments, will work with those regulators to make sure they have a clear understanding of the need to meet these respective commitments and respective obligations that the regulators have. Understandably, many respondents to the government's own consultation shared concerns, with 25% opposing the changes. To this end, but however, while we welcome the government updating the statutory guidance, as the Minister's referred to clarify how the growth duty should fit within the regulator's existing obligations, it will be helpful to have more information on precisely how that will be done. And given the delicacy and importance of the regulators' roles in policing their various sectors, how does the government intend to closely monitor the impact of these changes in a timely manner? And as an example related to Ofcom, could the Minister imagine a situation where the expanded growth mandate could result in the green light being given to a takeover that could compromise, for instance, our national security, the free and fair media, or lead to one provider dominating the media landscape? He'll be aware of certain examples where, for instance, foreign governments have sought to buy stakes in our media and so on. Are there provisions in place that he's comfortable with that cover those concerns? If not, what further steps should be made, can be made, to provide the reassurance to the public that the growth duty, while welcome and necessary and helpful, needs to be applied in an appropriate way to protect our free media, to protect our national interest? We on the Labour benches recognise the importance of a long-term plan in order to grow the UK economy, particularly after such a long period of sluggish growth. That is why we have made securing the highest sustained growth in the G7 the central mission of a future Labour government. But it seems this has only recently come to the fore for the government. And I wonder if the Minister could set out why these three regulators have been added on now rather than at the time. There may be very good reasons for it. It would be helpful to understand better. Is that because the government wanted to do further preparatory work with the regulators before introducing the growth duty? And were these regulators considered earlier on when the others were first introduced? In summary, Mr. Chairman, we support these regulations, but we urge the government to meticulously monitor their impact and effectiveness in delivering long-term growth, and to ensure that the safeguards are in place to make sure that the regulators fulfil their primary objectives, though these are not framed in the same way. It would be helpful, again, if the Minister could clarify whether there is a differentiation in terms of primary and secondary objectives, as has been the case in relation to the example I mentioned earlier, or are they parallel objectives, and if there are any issues about competing demands on the regulators. Thank you.